This is Gemara in Makkos, Daf Hey, and we like to dedicate the learning as an incredible zchos for Elias Neshama for Lezer Moshe ben Sheyma, whose yahrzeit is going to be on the second day of Pesach, which will be tomorrow's Daf B'siyata D'Shmaya. All the learning, the inestimable koyach HaTorah should bring Eliezer Moshe ben Sheyma to a higher and higher place in Gan Eden Shalmaila and be a Militz Yosher for the entire Mishpacha. We're holding on to Alam and Beis. We're 4 lines at the bottom, and once again as well, we like to dedicate the learning as Lezchut for Shleima for Tinaik Ben Miriam Ahuva. We're in the middle of 4 lines at the bottom. Rabbanan Hailo Sanav Chaka Maidarshi Bay. Going back to the din of the Mishnah, the Machlekes Rameir and the Chachamim, whether you get an Isser of Loisana, the Isser of Ida Sheker, as well as the Kasher Zaman. If you were to get both, say Rameir, you seemingly would have to pay, you have to be receiving, 80 Malchus. Rabbanan said, no, you only get 40 Malchus. So ask the Gemara, Rabbanan, what do the Rabbanan do with the Isser Daraisa of Ida Sheker? Answers the Gemara, you know what the Rabbanan say? The Rabbanan say that is the Azhara. That is the warning of the whole Yesod of Eidim Zaymimim. Eidim Zaymimim say the Chachamim need to have a pasuk that explicates this Isser. That is not lying falsely. But if that is true, so now the Gemara turns the tables and says the Gemara, what about Rameir? How does he respond? Says the Gemara, moving on to the last line of Dalam Beis. Nafka later Rameir learned it out from Hanish Arim Yishma'u V'yira'u V'layasifu. Those who remain will hear and they'll fear and they won't continue to do anything more, which is by Eidim Zaymim, which is the Azhara that you can't lie. For Rabbanan Ahumi Baile, what do Rabbanan say? What do they do this extra pasuk? If Loisana is coming along to teach us the dictum against Eidos Zaymimim, the problem with testifying falsely, particularly by Eidim Zaymim. So what do the Rabbanan do with this pasuk? Says the Gemara, moving over to Hiyam and Aleph, Lahachraza. This pasuk, according to the Rabbanan, is teaching us that you have to announce that the courts, the Bezdin, has to announce that the Eidim Zaymim are being punished. Why? For what they did incorrectly. As Rashi over here quotes Gemara in Sanhedrin Peites, Arba Srichan Azchzara, to announce why they're getting punished. V'Rameir, Hachzara Meish V'Viro, the Afka Rameir learns out both from the same pasuk. So that is the end of the Machlekes Rameir and the Chachamim regarding what level of Isser, how many Malchus one's going to have to receive. On the same exact vein, says the Mishnah on the top of Heyam and Aleph, Mishalshin b'mamoin, vein mishalshin b'makis. Mamoin could be split up amongst the different Eidim, but Makkos cannot. Ketzad. Someone gave Eidos that Ruvain owes Shimon 200 zos, and then the Eidim and Imsu Zaymim are found to be Zaymim. Mishalshin beinayim, they split up the payments amongst themselves. Then each one is going to receive a full arbayim. We're not going to split up the malchus. Asks the Gemara, from where do we know that each of the Eidim are going to get the full 39 malchus, the full arbayim that they tried to inflict on someone else? Amar Abaye Nemarasha b'chayvei malchiyos. Then the same word is used by both. Therefore, equates Abaya. Malahala, and just when it comes to the Misa, there's no concept. Ein Misa lachatzayin. You can't get killed half. That's not possible. Afghan. So to over here says Abaya, ein Misa, ein Malkos lemechsa, you're not going to get half Malkos. Teretz of Abaye. Rava Amar says Rava no. You know the reason is the Yisaitistic explanation explains Rava. Beinon kasher zamam lasois le'achov v'leka. You need to get what you were trying to give to someone else, and you were trying to give a full 39 Malkos, and therefore they have to get the full 39, and you can't split it amongst the two Eidim. Says the Gemara, saying, wait, if we were trying to be mechayiv to own $100, so said the Mishnah, each of the Eidim Zaymin pays half, each pays 50. But ask the Gemara, why? It's not kasher zamam. It's not what you tried to do to the other person. Explains the Gemara, mamain mitzaref, malkos loy mitzaref. Mamain combines. Each of the Eidim give 50. And as Rashi speaks out, and together the monies that they were trying to make him lose are paid. So the money is mitzarif, but the malkis is not. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, until it's a personal hazama. Ketzad. What does that mean? They testify that Reuven killed someone. And they saw other Edim come and say, hey, Edim, how are you testifying that Reuven killed someone? How are you testifying that Shaharei Nerigazeh, that he killed someone else? Imanu Isai Zeh Imanu Shaharei Nerigazeh Oya Harigzeh. How could he do that? Imanu Isai B'makom. You were not there. You were in a different place with us. Ein Elu Zaymim. Then that is not considered Zaymin. Aval Amru Lahem, if they say to them, hey Chatem Idim Sharatem Ayisem Imanu, hey Chatem Ayisem Midim, how can you testify Sharatem Ayisem Imanu Ayisem Makom you with us? Then Hare Elu Zaymim V'neragin Al Pihem. So a subtle chilik, but an important chilik. If he says, hey Chatem Idim Sharing Nerig Zeh, how can you testify that this person killed or this person was killed? That person was with us. Meaning, if they're testifying about the victim, we'll call it, not about the Eidim, then it doesn't create Eidim Zaymim. But if the other Eidim come along and say to the Eidim directly, you were with us. Again, the Eidim testify that Reuven killed Shimon. So if other Eidim come in and say, how can you say Reuven killed Shimon? We were with Reuven or Shimon elsewhere. Then that does not create Zaymin. Zaymin is only created if they say that the Eidim were elsewhere. Ba'acherim ve'zimam. If there's subsequent hazamas, afilu meya, kulam yehargu, they all get the death penalty. Rav Yehuda Aimer, on the first very wide line, says Rav Yehuda, no, istatis izu, they're just plotters, they're conspiring to discredit everyone if they keep on saying about each person, imanu yisem, and therefore, in only the first one gets killed, but not all the subsequent Eidim that are quote-unquote found to be Eidim Zaymim, because they kept on saying imanu yisem. Says the Gemara, Minani meili amar avad amar kravini 8 sheker ha'id sheker 8 sheker Anna ashet sheker kufa shaleidos. Therefore, it's not going to be enough to talk about the victim or the murderer. It's very shmal tana. Lana is by Sarah ashet tisra kufa shaleidos. So two different makaris. The din that we said in the Mishnah, it's only going to be azama if we're talking about the Eidim themselves. Two people came, says Rava, and they said, "B'mizrach birar plenius and avish on the east side of the tower." Oh, Shnayim, and two other ones come from and they say, what do you mean? But you were with us on the west side of the tower. Chazina, so we check. If from the other opposite end you could see there, then in Eluzayim could be there or there. Says Barb of course. So explains the Gemara 7 lines into the white lines on Hey Amid Aleph. Says the Gemara, maybe we should be so sorrowful that this guy Mamish can see Gavalde, therefore he can see even a place that people can't see Kamashalan, that is not Shaykh. Similarly, in Surah on Sunday morning. What do you mean? Even if you're with us in Arda, so Chazinan, even a 1 day trip, you can make it there. Says the Gemara Pshita. That's obvious. So that maybe we could that the camel ran very, very fast. Kamash Malan, we're not chayshish for that. Two Eidim come and say that on Sunday someone committed murder. And two other Eidim come and say Yimano Yisem with us on Sunday. But it's true that you killed someone. It's happened to have been on Monday. Not only that, it was Erev Shabbos. Nergin, why? When they give Eidos, he wasn't considered a dead person. Therefore, we'll listen to the first Eidim. Says Yomar Maika Mashimlan. What's the Chiddush Hanina? We learn. Lefik nimsu achas me'en zayim mois hu ve'hein aragim hashniya patura. That's what we learn out from Sigmar Sefer. Masha Engein b'Gemar Din Yitzrichle. What's the Chiddush? Bo Shtayim ve'am Sefer b'Gemar Din Yitzrichle. Says the Gemara. Bo Shnayim. Two people come. V'amru b'chav Shabbat Nigmar Dina Shablani. You're with us. You're right, it was a Gemara Din, but it was on Friday, you got your days messed up. It was on Monday, Shablani. We need a day that the Eidos is given, he is a Barakatalu. You're with us, I'll betray Shabbat on Monday. Mishalmin. Shabbos gonna have Savar. Mamish the same thing we just said Machar, but Mishalmin. Either come inside the government lever Tashmu. Bosh, I remember Chabishat gonna have the Tavach Umachar. Vinigmar Dina Bosh, I remember Chabishat money easy with us on Erev Shabbos. It's true you did it, just was Erev Shabbos, says the Gemara. Gonna Vitavach, 3 lines to the bottom Umachar, Vinigmar Dina. Floida, Filu Amr, even they said, Chabishat gonna have a Tavach Umachar. You have to make sure that each adios is taken independently of the other, and that's the only time you'll be chayiv the Makkos and the other payments. And because at that point he's not considered a gavra bar katala hu. So in the last line we quote Shitas Rav Yehuda, who in the Mishnah said Rav Yehuda status hizu. Then when we have subsequent Eidim Zaymim, each subsequent group accused of being Imanu Ayisem, accused of not actually being there at the time that the crime was committed. So the Tanakama said each one is going to get killed. Said Rav Yehuda, no, Istatis Izu, we assume that they're plotting together, therefore only the first group gets killed. Ask the Gemara 1 second, obvious kasha. Istatis Izu afilu kari shayna nami loy. If they're planning to kill someone, and even the first group should not get killed, why does Rav Yehuda agree that the first group, yes, gets killed? They already killed him. Says the Gemara, it already happened. So what's it teaching us? What is the Mishnah teaching us? That the first group gets killed? They got killed at a time that they thought that they were indeed chayiv. Elamai Rava Hachi Kamas Rav Yehuda says, Im Einoi Ela Kat Achas Nareges. Rav Yehuda says is if there's only one set of Eidim, then in a Chanami, then they are killed. However, Vikatfei, then we have this concern that there is status and Ein Neharogin. Says the Gemara Bilvad Kamar, it says Kat Rishona Bilvad, which clearly indicates there's more than one. Says the Gemara, you're right. Kasha, this is a kasha which will have to stick as a kasha. Says the Gemara, case similar to the Mishnah. Hayitza, 6 lines down, Dasu Sadi Vishtaker. There was a woman who brought Eidim to testify, and they were found to be Dishtaker. They were found to be, through the process of Drishas and Chakirais, they were found to be lying. Isi Sadi, she brought another set of Rida Vishtaker. Isi Sadi, so a third time she goes and brings Eidim, and the third one, Sadi Achrin Lo Yishtaker. Amar Reish Lakish, Hochsekuzu, says Reish Lakish, this woman has been muchzak, has been established that the Eidim that she brought are false, and therefore, even though these third group of Eidim at this point were not found to be lying, says Reish Lakish, they don't have an M on us. Amrli Rav Elazar, says Rav Elazar, what do you mean? Emi Hochsika, Kol Yisrael Mi Hochsiku. You're right that she's muchzak to get false Eidim, but the Eidim have to concur to give false testimony. So the fact that she is muchzak, how does it teach us that people will actually testify falsely? And therefore, says Rav Elazar, the Eidim have a credibility. Explains Rav Yechlan, didn't have a Yasik Amid Rav Yechlan. Returns in front of Rav Yechlan, Asa, Ki I Maislik Amai, Amrei Shakish Achsikuzu, she is muchzak, we don't believe the third set of Eidim. So they do have an M on us. Other Chazir Rav Elazar Bishas. Reish Lakish looked around and looked at Rav Elazar sternly upset. Amar Lei. He says to him, Shmas Mili Mibar Navcha. V'lo Amar Li Davar. You heard something Mibar Navcha. Excuse me. Shmas Mili Dvar Nachla Amar Li Mishmei. You heard something, you have to tell it over in his name. Why are you ki'ilu pretending like this is your chiddush? No, say it over in the name of Rav Yechanan. Says the Gemara, Lim Reish Lakish Tamar Rav Yehuda. So should we say that it comes out that Reish Lakish says like Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yechanan Tamar Karvanan? Sounds like this machlokes Rav Yechanan and Reish Lakish is the machlokes between Rav Yehuda and the Chachamim. Amlecha Reish Lakish, no. Anad Amri Lacha Filu de Rabbanan. Ad Kano Kam Loika Amri Rabbanan Asam. When do the Rabbanan say that in only case the Mishnah, multiple Hazamas, the lack of the Kamahader? The reason is there's no one looking for Eidim. They're coming on their own, and therefore there will eventually be a credibility, and we won't say that no, they're all considered to be lying. But over here, someone is looking for the Eidim. That's why we keep saying that she's the one that keeps on finding Eidim, Mishakrim. And therefore, the cases are not comparable. Rav Yechanan Amar, the last line, L'cha, Anadam Yafilu Rav Yehuda, Ad Kano Kamar. When did Rav Yehuda say is din L'kamar Rav Yehuda in the first very wide line? Hasam, Darmin Atu Kuliyama, Gani, Hani Have Kaima. When did Rav Yehuda say is din there? He said over there, Darmin Atu Kuliyama, Gabi Hani Have Kaima, were everyone by these people? Of course, they were not. Avalach over here, Hani Yadi V'Sadusa, Bahani Lo Yadi V'Sadusa. Could be that the last Eidim, no, the Eidos, where the early ones did not, and therefore the fact that the first two groups are found to be not telling the truth does not show anything about a later group. We continue with another Mishnah on the second wide line. Says the Mishnah, Ein ha'edim zaymin na'aragim. Eidim zaymin are not killed ad she'igamer adin, until there was a gemar din, meaning if they testified that someone is chayim misa, and the Beis Din paskin based on their testimony, and then they're found to be Eidim Zaymim, then they are Chayim Misa. Why? Sharei HaTzedukim Aimrim, the Tzedukim would say Hachihargu until the Bezdin actually kills base in the world. Shenamar Nefesh Atachas Nefesh. Arm the Chacham of a Kvar Nemar, the Pasuk says, V'yisis Lo Kasher Zamam, Lasas Li'echav Ari'echav Kayom. But the brother's still alive. In Keilam Never Nefesh, Tachas Nefesh. What's that Pasuk for? Yachim Mishash Kibbulei Dusan Yahargu, Tamalaimer, no, Nefesh Tachas Nefesh, Ha'ina Neragin, Ad Shei Gemar Din. So the Chacham hold, of course, you need a Gemar Din, but you don't need to have the next step where the Bezdin actually follow through on their Gemar Din. Whereas the Tzedukim hold that no, only if the Bezdin actually went ahead and killed the person will the Eidim Zaymim be Chayev Misa. Says the Gemara, Tana, we learned in a Braisa. Baribi Aimer says, Baribi Lo Yahargu Neharagim. If the ones who testify falsely did not yet kill their victim and they're found to be Zaymim, Neharagim, then they are killed. Hargu. But if they already killed the person, then they're found to be Zaymim, then Ein Neharagim, they're not killed anymore. Amar Avin says, his father says, Bini, Lavka v'chaimru, I don't understand. You're telling me only before we act on their edus do they get killed. But if we actually killed based on the words, they don't get killed, it makes no sense. Lavka v'chaimru, Amar Leibrivi said, Lemanu Rabbeinu, Sheinayin Sheminadin, even if you're going to tell me it's Kal v'chaimer, no. We never give punishments based on Kal v'chaimer's Titania. We learned in our Braisa, Basav Basimai. Ainly Alabas Aviv Shlobasimai. Basima Shlobasaviv. Basimo Basavim Minayin. How do we know if it's both? Talmud Loimar Ervazach Gila. So explains the Gemara. Ad Shaloyimar Yeshli Bedin. Ad Shaloyimar Yeshli Bedin. Now, even if the Torah had not said that it had to be a full sister, I could have learned it from a Kal v'chaimer. Im anash al bas aviv shloi bas imai, o bas imai shloi bas aviv, bas aviv bas imai like koshkin. It's a simple Kal v'chaimer. Halamadita. So what do we learn? Shein einshem min adin. They were never going to punish based on a Kal v'chaimer. So this explains the Gemara, and if this Gemara sounds familiar, it's because we recently had a carbon copy of this Gemara in Sanhedrin, and it exists elsewhere. Remember, we learn out that regarding a punishment, you can't learn out from a Kal v'chaimer. Ba'azhara minayin, Talmud loymar ervas ha'chayzcha ba'savicha ba'simecha. Ein li'ala ba'saviv shlo ba'sima ba'sima shlo ba'saviv. Ba'saviv u'ba'sima minayin Talmud loymar ervas ba'sisha savicha meledes avicha ha'chayzcha yeshlim yeshlim min adin. Again, it's obvious. A similar psukim teaching us that just like ein einshim min adin, ein mazhirim min adin, that we need to have an explicit pasuk. We cannot create an isser based on a Kal v'chaimer. Now we go back to our Mishnah and ask the Gemara, Chayve Malkius Minayim. How do we know this halacha with regarding to Malchus? That the Eidim Zaymim do not get their punishment unless there's a Gemar Din, but there wasn't an actual Misa had. So says the Gemara, where do we know this from? Talmud Loimar, Rasha. Chayve Galius Minayim. How do we know it by Chayve Galius? Asir Yitzhak. Two different Zira Shavas. So Tana, we went in a race, and Tavai. Era Binechama. I'll see the consolation of Arakta Zaymim. If I did not kill Zaymim for testifying falsely, why? To show not like Tzedukim Shayim, they would say names Zaymim Naragim, as we saw in the Mishnah. Ad She'oirek, till they actually kill. Hanidan Aime, Asheri Ganidon. Amle Shimon Shatach, Ermin Achama. I should see the consolation of Shavach the Dam Naki. If you have spilled innocent blood, they They have to both be found to be Zayim. They like him, and we don't give Makkos ad Sheiz HaMushleim. Miyad Kibla Yud Ben Tavai Shein Mayra Hayra. Yud Ben Tavai sees that he's incorrect. He says he's not going to paskin. Ella Lifnei Shimon Ben Shatach. So Shimon Ben Shatach could correct him if he makes any mistakes. On that day, the Ravida ben Tabai killed incorrectly. Every day he was lying and asking for mechila by a koile nishma, and his voice would be heard by people. However, they didn't know who it was. Chasavruah ha'am leimar kol shel haruk amar koili shalihu teidai lemachar umeis. Tomorrow he's going to die, referring to himself, and Ein Karle Nishma, and you'll see that the voice will not be heard anymore. Armali Ravacha Breda Ravel Ravashi Dilma Bedina Kam Bahadei. But maybe Buddha Tabai is going to go up to Shamayim and he's going to settle a verdict with him, Bidin. So how do you know that it's going to prove that it wasn't his voice? Inami Puse Payose, and therefore both of these are possible, and therefore it's not necessarily a proof whether it's going to be his voice, the Edim's voice. But we see how clear the din is, not like the Tzedukim, how Rav Yudin Tabai erred in that regard. Pick it up from the Mishnah, B'siyata Dishmaya.